Onions are one of my favorite vegetables to grow. Not only do they have many health benefits, but they can make you seem like a master chef when you use them in your recipes. And oh, the house smells so good when they're cooking. So, whether you've planted your onions from set or from seed, there's going to come a time when you need to harvest them. Deciding when to pull your onions can be pretty easy, actually. If your onions look like this, and they have nice green tall stalk, and they're not tipped over, leave them in the ground. However, if they look like this motley crew, where their tops are starting to die and they're bent over, from whatever reason, it's time to harvest them. Now, I harvest my onions by just pulling them out of the garden. I just usually carefully grab the top, and it pulls right out. That time, the top broke off, and that's okay. You could use a shovel or a fork to dig your onions out. Just make sure that you leave space back so you don't damage your onion bulb. This is a good time to inspect your onions to make sure they're doing okay. And I definitely recommend leaving the tops on, because if you cut your tops like this onion here, whether you pull it or leave it in the ground, the tops will be encouraged to grow. And that tells the onion that it's making new top and not actually finishing the bulb. The bulb will dry out as the tops dry out and be ready for storage. These are some onions that I've pulled previously, and I'm just inspecting them. You'll see that some of the tops are a little bit wider than others. When they have a nice narrow top like that, they will store quite nicely. However, if they have a larger top, a larger neck, they won't store as well. How to spot rot? Now, sometimes rot is very obvious. When you look at the root base of your onion, you will see that it is just rotten. But sometimes it's sneaky. Sometimes it's just a little bit of a white powder, or the fact that the onion is starting to pull away from where the root ball comes out. Those onions won't keep. These onions are clearly not going to keep, and I salvage as much of those onions as I can later. Here's an example of an onion that has some white powdery stuff on it, and it looks like you should just be able to wipe it off and it would be just fine. However, if I wanted to store this onion, it would not keep, because that is the beginning of white rot. My favorite way to dry onions. Glen so kindly made me an onion drying rack this year out of a 2x6 board that he ripped into strips. Our two boards are 4 inches apart with a 1-inch gap to support our larger onions and yet have enough space for the tops to hang down. On this drying rack, I have sorted my onions into locations they were harvested from the garden. You don't want to be tempted to pull off any of the onion leaves if they're sticking out like that and they're dry, even though some of them will fall off on their own. So while I have my onions sorted into different locations from the garden, I'm just going to keep adding to this board. Now, the onions can make quite a mess, and so we do leave ours outside, but we bring them into the garage overnight. You can also bring your onions into a shed or an overhang as long as they don't get wet. Wet onions are not happy onions. Because they're drying so nicely with the root ball sticking up like that, they are super easy to check, because where your rot is going to start on your onions is at the root ball. What I plan on doing with these onions is tying them. I did not waste the onions that had some rot on them. I cut the rot off, chopped them, and put them in the freezer. Thanks for watching, you guys. Take care.